So today we'll study about K-mean clustering, its brief description and its code. K-mean clustering is one of the simplest and popular unsupervised machine learning algorithms. It's an algorithm that is used to solve the clustering problems in machine learning or data science. K-means refers to averaging of the data, that is, finding the centroid. Its applications are diagnostic systems and search engines. Clustering forms the backbone of search engines. When a search is performed, the search result needs to be grouped, and the search engine very often uses the technique of clustering. There are steps for K-mean clustering. The step 1 is make clusters and assign centroids. Centroids can be random and can also be from the data. Then we compute the actual centroid of data points of both groups and assign the new centroids. Then, once the cluster becomes static, the K-means algorithm is said to be converged. The final cluster with centroids C1 and C2 are shown below. The algorithm has 4 steps. The step 1 is to choose k random points as cluster centers, and we call them centroids. And then we assign each x to the closest cluster by implementing distance formula. Then the step 3 is that we identify new centroids by taking the average of assigned points. Step 4 is we keep repeating step 3 and step 2 until convergence is achieved. Now let's move towards the coding part. I have used a variable named df to read the data file, and then I have displayed the data file. So according to the first step of the algorithm, we have to select the centroids. We have selected 2 centroids, C1 and C2. The values are 10 and 23. These values are from the data, and they can also be from outside the data. Now we have to calculate the distance. The distance formula is given by x minus c, where x is the value and the c is the centroid. We have 2 variables, tc1 and tc2. These are the temporary centroids we are going to calculate, and then we're going to compare these values. We have 2 clusters, empty clusters, c1, cluster 1 and cluster 2. Then we have a while loop that will run until the value of temporary centroids and the original centroids become equal. So we have sum equals 0, cluster 1 and cluster 2 as empty, and then we have a for loop which will run until there is data present in df. Now x and y are the values of the distance from the centroids c1 and c2, and then if we check if the distance is negative. So we have a condition that if x is less than 0 or if y is less than 0, we multiply both of the values with -1 to make them positive. Then we have to choose which cluster we're going to add the values to. So if the distance of cluster 1 is less, we add it to the cluster 1. So if x is less than y, we add it to cluster 1. If x is greater than y, we add it to cluster 2. And if both of the values are equal, we decide which cluster we have to add it by seeing the length of the clusters. Which cluster has the least amount of elements, we're going to add the value to that cluster. So here are 3 conditions: that if length of cluster 1 is less than cluster 2, we add it to cluster 1. If length of cluster 1 is greater than length of cluster 2, we add it to the cluster 2. And else, if both of the lengths are equal, we add it to any cluster. I have chosen cluster 1, and then we have to update the centroids. First we calculate the new centroids. So the new centroids will be calculated by sum divided by the length of the clusters. This will make the average. This is the average formula, sum of the values divided by the number of the values. So we do this for cluster 1 and cluster 2 and store the values in tc1 and tc2. Now we check if the value of tc1 and tc2 are equal to c1 and c2. If they are equal, then we break the loop and we just complete our algorithm. And if these values are not equal, we update the values of c1 and c2 to tc1 and tc2. So this is the algorithm. Now we will run the last code. So wait a minute, let's run from the start. So here are the values of the centroids. This 10 and 23, these are the values we assumed or we picked, and these are the values we calculated. Now these values become the updated centroid values, and then these are the values of the new centroids, and then at the end the values become equal and the loop is terminated. So this was the whole code. Thank you for watching.